Yeah, yeah, yeah,
All right. Hello again, and thank you for joining me on the From Grief to Purpose channel. I'm your host, Nina. And as we all know, life isn't one dimensional, it's filled with ups, downs, losses, healing, and everything in between. And every story carries something that we can all grow from. And that's why I love having, those conversations, just because we get to hear real experiences from different people, their real journeys, and what healing actually looks like in real life, in real time. So today, our conversation is a sensitive one, just to give you a heads up, but it's an important one, especially during the month of April. The month of April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So, we're going to be touching on something, a conversation centered around that, a journey centered around that. We're going to be talking about trauma. We're going to talk about therapy and what it looks like to process and heal from things that aren't, always easy to talk about. If you are new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you would like to and join this community so we can continue to reach more people who need conversations like the ones that we have here. So, joining me today, I'm going to be joined by Linda. Miss Linda, I'm sorry. I don't wanna butcher your name. Could you
No,
pronounce your
you
name
get
for me,
it.
please, the last name?
Linda Feig Knipe.
Linda Feig Knipe. Thank you. Because I was like, I had it in my head. I was like, "You know what? Let's just go ahead and ask Linda to say it for us." But we are gonna be joined today by Linda Feig Knipe. And I want to just share with you a little bit about her. So, throughout her life, Linda has been guided by a single goal to raise people up. After a career that included work with the American Red Cross and social work, she found her calling as a high school counselor, helping others navigate their own challenges. But during her graduate studies, she was faced with something deeply personal, having to navigate PTSD connected to past trauma. She is now the author of Braving Therapy, Rape, Buried Trauma, and the Triumphant Journey Over PTSD, where she shares her story in a very real and honest way, while also helping others understand what healing through therapy can actually look like. Linda, thank you so much for being here. I do not take it lightly that you are on with us to join and share and converse about your journey. But before we get into everything, I just want to say I, again, appreciate you about to be open with us. I know parts of your story are sensitive, so feel free to share only what you're comfortable with. I always stress that because I don't want anyone to ever feel like you have to overshare, and I just want this to be a space that is safe for you. So to start us off, again, welcome. Can you share, at whatever level you feel comfortable sharing, Linda, just a little bit about your journey and what led you to writing the book? We can start there, or share a little bit about your journey, please.
Well, hi, Nina. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to talk to you. Um, okay, so I've always worked in the helping services, and I'll tell you that I always knew that was my calling. Um, because I was fortunate enough to grow up in a big, nurturing family, and we we all got along well, and we were, um, I would call it, as a kid, a pretty charmed life. I had a lot of siblings, and I was the oldest girl. I was second oldest, and I don't know why, but when I was in high school, it just started seeming unfair to me that I had what I considered a charmed life with loving parents and siblings that I really liked. And so many people didn't have that. And I
Mm,
just felt like I needed to to try and even the playing field to help people who weren't as lucky as I was. So that was kind of my understanding of my purpose in life. It was just a compulsion kind of. When I graduated, I went to college for psychology. When I graduated, I got a job as a social worker. Um, and then as I moved on and got married and had kids, um, I worked for the Red Cross as a Red Cross director, chapter executive director, which was very rewarding. But I felt like I could do more. And I felt like if I started in the schools working with young people, especially about their career plans and how they were going forward with their life, that that could really impact a lot of people. So I went back to graduate school when I was in my late 30s. And in the first counseling class that I was in, um, at the end of the class, it was a summer course, so there were only a dozen students in there. We were sitting around in a circle talking about therapy. And I asked a
Mhm,
question based on some unfortunate experience that I had had if therapy ever felt worse before it, or if therapy ever felt bad.
mm,
And the professor kind of got really quiet and he said, well, carefully, he said this carefully. Well, in this situation where someone has a rape in their background that they didn't do anything about and it's gone on for years and then they go to therapy, therapy is going to be harder before you start to get better.
mm,
And that was actually my situation. And I felt at that moment like somebody had just thrown something at my face and I wanted to blink, but we were sitting in a circle and I was thinking to myself, just don't blink because they'll all know that something happened.
mhm,
So instead, I was just focused on don't blink, don't blink. And when I got out of there, um, PTSD symptoms started almost immediately. When I
mm,
got in the car and I was driving home, I had stopped at a store, and before I got out of the car, I felt like someone was trying to crawl on me. So it was just a really immediate response, and then within the next few days, it was full blown. Um, I was having lots of re-experiencing. I was having nightmares. I couldn't sleep. I started having a really hard time eating anything. Yeah, so I finally went back to him, and I felt like I was going crazy, and I didn't know what was happening, and he explained to me about PTSD and about memory, and told me basically that I was, especially because I was in a counseling program, um, I was going to need to deal with it. I couldn't just
mhm,
I wanted to just shove it all away just like I'd always done. I was tough and I was strong and I felt like I should be able to handle this. I should be able to control my mind. And he said, "You're not going to be able to just control this." He said, "It's kind of got
mhm,
control of you and you are going to need to work through it now." So so that started me on the road of finding a therapist and therapy.
mm, wow. Now, I have the book here, and I have some areas that I wanted to highlight if I can just read.
Sure.
First of all, like the main one in the intro, is there's a poem that you share, Linda, and the end of it caught me. And I'll just read just a brief bit of that. You all have to go check out the book for yourself to get more insights into it. Because of course, I'm not gonna sit here and read the whole chapter, you guys, to you. But there's a portion that says, "I have to remember why I'm here. My purpose used to be so clear. My life is not my own to live. To God and family, I must give. Everything else falls far behind. I'll do this till I lose my mind." When I read that, I just thought about, I was thinking of your experience. I was also thinking of someone that has experienced traumatic events, I was also thinking of the person grieving. And I'm always curious as to like how do you get there, after experiencing something as traumatic as, you experienced, with being raped. I often think of it sometimes myself too. I can go back to the younger me, and losing my mother at such a young age when, you're like, I have to remember why I'm here, because maybe like what points within yourself are you, able to even think about that or start to care about that part of yourself again? Like, you know, why am I here? What is the point of moving forward? Like, what is the point of like continuing on with my life if I'm making sense?
I think we all have times like that. I think
Hmm.
that's the human condition, is it's not ever going to all be good. And so the poem, when I was younger, I don't do it so much now, but when I was younger, I used to write poems every once in a while when something was just kind of eating at me. And
Hmm.
then every year uh, when I started having kids, I would write a poem to of the year to put in the Christmas cards that we all used to write. And
Hmm.
this year, the poem starts out. I can't write about what's going on this year because it's all so dark.
Hmm.
But I wrote the poem anyway. But it was not anything that I ever sent, and I was surprised I found it all these years later when I in the book. I was able to put it there, so that's the first time anybody saw it. But it was how difficult life was and how much I was struggling, but I still felt like I still had that sense of purpose, and it was still that feeling of I just have to keep on plugging through this. I have to put away what it is that's bothering me, and I need to just keep moving forward with
Hmm.
this purpose that I feel.
Hmm. Okay. Now, we'll go back to the point where you have now found a therapist, and you touched on it in chapter 8 of your book titled PTSD. Before, like I guess, yes, you're like going through the process, and then you're coming upon your own therapy, which is of course interesting. I always there was a woman, that I had met, I think she was more of like a when I was doing my counseling, degree, and I was asking her about, like, no, she was telling me about her own therapy process, and she was a counselor, and she was like, "Girl, every therapist needs a therapist," and I was like, "Really?" I was like, "I didn't know that therapists had therapists or counselors had counselors," I just thought that you guys were, you know, at the top of your field, you had the degrees, you had all the knowledge for yourself, and you didn't really, need a individual. That was back in my, you know, younger educational days of just like understanding how things work and, people. But I was thinking like, here of course you are and you're in this field that deals with a lot of mental health, and now you're finding yourself needing it as well. But how do you well, let's go to for someone who not, doesn't have a full understanding of PTSD, let's start there first. How did it show up for you in real life? I know you touched on it a bit, but let's break it down for someone that just may not understand, especially as it relates to like sexual assault, such traumatic events like these. How does PTSD occur? Because I think we talk about PTSD, we hear a lot about it initially with military, and they do a great job a little bit explaining it. And now they're starting to break it down even more. Like PTSD shows up in many different situations. But if you can explain just a little bit more for the viewer that's watching that may not have a full understanding of PTSD, how did it show up in your life?
Okay. First of all, let me explain how we store memories. So the nice thing when this first all started for me because I was in graduate school. I had access to the graduate school library. So I was able to look up papers on PTSD and on memory. And the way that memory works, I'll describe that first, and traumatic memory. So I read something, and I don't remember who it was. It was 20 years ago, but that memory is biology plus biography equals memory. So the
Mhm,
biology are the sensations you feel. It's the emotions you feel about things. It's the way your body's responding
mhm,
um, to an event. And then you add the narrative to it. You put the story or the words to it. And then you have the biology of the sensations of your body with the biography, which is the story, and you store that in your memory, and it gets properly stored like you put a file in the file cabinet in the right spot.
mhm,
That's how memory, when it's working correctly, works. With traumas, a lot of times you have sensations and your body is on hypervigilance, and it's really uncomfortable because the sensations that you have within a trauma and then following a trauma are very uncomfortable. And so some people can still put the biography to it, they can still put the story to it and store it correctly. But a lot of people, and I was one of them, will bury it because it's so uncomfortable you don't want to think about it. So you
mhm,
don't put a story to those sensations, you just shove them away as fast as you can. So
mhm,
I liken it to when, I don't know when what you do, but when I have people coming over and there are things sitting out in my house that I want to put away, but I don't know what to do with them. There's a junk closet. It's actually right behind me. That I will scoop up all of that other stuff and put it on one of the shelves in the junk closet. And over time, it's not like I clean out the junk closet. Over time,
mhm,
more stuff just gets shoved in and shoved in and shoved in, things that you don't know what to
mhm,
do with. And eventually, this is the PTSD part, is that if you shove so much stuff into that junk closet, it's stuff you don't know what to do with, and you open the door to put more in, or you
mhm,
open the door to get something, things are going to start falling out. So if you
mm,
liken that to a junk closet in your brain or a junk drawer in your brain, that's what they call compartmentalization, that you're putting things away in a spot in your brain. They're not stored correctly. They're not filed in the proper file cabinet, in
mhm,
proper drawer. They're just shoved somewhere. And eventually they will start popping out. So, so the reason that that happens, and the reason that our brain works that way, is we have this portion of the brain called the amygdala, and um, there are terms called amygdala hijack or amygdala attack, where um, those sensations. I had a professor who described the amygdala as kind of like the old operator who things go in and it assigns where they need to go and it plugs them in. However, if you're not thinking about it, if you don't put the story to that, there are sensations that just um, stay there, and your amygdala is kind of it's part of the brain that needs to keep us safe. So
mm,
if something in your life happens that feels like it there's a piece of it that might feel threatening,
mm,
and it may not really be threatening anymore, but it's a piece that was in that threatening situation, you
mhm,
might you're you might start hyperventilating. You might um, start feeling very anxious, your eyes dilate, you start breathing heavy. So, those things are what our body does when we're getting prepared to fight or flee. When
Mhm.
you're breathing heavy, when your eyes are dilating, it's so that you can see better. When you
Mhm.
start breathing heavy, you're oxygenating your muscles so that you can either fight or flee. That's your body working to keep you safe because ultimately it's our brain's job and the amygdala's job to watch out for dangers and to keep us alive. So that's
Mhm.
kind of what happens. But in that situation where you have just these emotions floating around that are attached to the wrong things, it's like pulling out a file. So I will describe that part of it where there was a PTSD symptom that I had that felt like things were crawling behind me, like bugs behind my back, like I was standing
Mm.
against a wall with bugs on it. And that would happen when I was in dark spaces, and it didn't have to
Mhm.
be like I couldn't see. I was at a football game one time. It was at night, so it was dark out, and I started getting this sensation of bugs behind my back, and I could not make it stop. That went on for probably a month, and I could not figure out what was happening. I couldn't control it. I couldn't make it stop. And I finally realized that it's the same sensation that I would have, that kind of heebie-jeebies feeling. So
Mhm.
when you're telling ghost stories around a
Mhm.
campfire or when you're just with friends and
Mhm.
you get that feeling in your back that you wanna look behind you, but you don't look behind you because people will laugh at you. So you just
Mm.
stare at that awful, creepy feeling in your back, and that was the feeling I was feeling in a crowd of people, but it would be at night. And I associated that finally with the feeling of dread, which
Mm.
is the feeling that I had had in the dark because the rape situation that I was in that caused me so much problems was that somebody had broken into my apartment in the middle of the night, and I woke up with him standing over my bed.
Mhm.
So that was that dread feeling. That was also one of the first emotions that I recognized because one of the things that happens is you start numbing yourself um,
Mhm.
in the PTSD situation because emotions are just feeling so uncomfortable.
Mhm. Mhm.
So other
Mm.
things that I would do are just a lot of beating myself up, a lot of feeling like I should be able to handle things um and feeling like I should be able to put it all away. And so I would beat myself up about that. And I had a lot of other re-experiencing feelings, like I said in the car when I felt like somebody was crawling on me.
Yeah,
So
yeah. N Now the, phrase it as you phrased it, the incident, the rape situation, this occurred
when I was young,
20 years ago when you were how
no, it occurred when I was in my mid 20s. I was
mid-20s, okay.
yes, I was living. I had an apartment of my own for the first time,
Mhm,
and I was working in a professional job, so I was able to handle that. And
mhm,
yeah, so that happened in my mid 20s, and then
mhm.
it was a rough year after that, but
Yeah,
I buried. Well, we actually, I was working with law enforcement for the next 6 months, and it ended up going to court. And
mm,
after that, I was struggling, and then I said that I had had a rough experience. I had a bad experience with therapy, so
mhm,
I didn't pursue that and decided I would never pursue that because it was such a negative experience for me. And finally, I just put it all away and I moved on and I got married and had kids. And so it was a real surprise. So it was 18 years later when I was in my graduate program um, that it may have not been that long, but it was a long time that it
yeah.
all popped back up.
Yeah, that's why I was curious as, how was it showing up in your day-to-day life? Like, 'cause, especially being an adult, like, we still are living and working and, all
Control
the
issues.
things.
Con control issues.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like, what was she how was she managing this, process? I know with, when you talked about, like, stuffing down emotions, and having the, certain things that we go through in different files, I'm definitely one of those people, and honestly didn't really notice it until I got older and had the language to put to it that I was storing, information and not dealing with it. I was just like, "Yeah, no, let me keep it moving."
So, one of the things that I found odd, and I didn't realize it until I was in that first counseling program. It was a course on different counseling theories and therapies. And
Mhm,
so we were talking about the different modalities and that there are, um, you have just being a person, you have your emotional side and your cognitive, your thinking side, and your behavioral side and your spiritual side.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and most of the students in the class were kind of more emotional thinkers. They let their
mhm,
emotions um, not dictate, but at least have a say in what they were doing. And then there were a couple of us that were very cognitive. Um, we were very practical. We didn't let emotions really weigh into decisions we were making or the things that we were talking about. And
mhm,
I think we felt a little superior about that.
mhm,
But then I realized that I didn't claim emotions. I would say things when I was talking about my emotions, I would
mhm.
say, it's a feeling of being sad, or it's a feeling of
Oh,
being scared. I couldn't even say I felt sad. And as we were talking about it in class, I remember, and I wrote about this in the book, I talked
yeah.
to my sister about it, and she
Mhm.
said, "Wow, I'm examining my emotions all the time." And I thought, that might be a little weird because I don't feel comfortable claiming an emotion. Like, I don't feel comfortable saying I'm sad.
Yeah, yeah. Let me read that part too, because I highlighted that portion too. So in the book, for the viewer, okay, so this is how it's mentioned. It's uh I'll start from here. As our kids played in the next room, I opened up about this self-discovery. I don't directly voice my emotions. I've been one of those people too. I don't say I feel sad or I feel scared. I said to my sister, she says, "What do you mean? You have emotions." She responded, "I know I do, but when I express them, it's kind of in a third person way. I always say it's a feeling of being sad or it's a feeling of being scared. I didn't realize I did that, or at least that it meant anything until I was reading that. It's kind of a way of to disown your feelings. And when I read this, I was like, "Oops, that's me." I've done this a lot, and especially the years of growing up. So I was like, um, with this, because I mean, it was a very traumatic event. Sexual assault is something that's extremely impactful, and how you process it, where do you think that derives from then within you? Because I've been trying to like factor out my own, like, well, where's that coming from? Like the way I process my emotions. Did I pick that up from somewhere? Did I learn that from like my father, my mother, or I don't know. But like, where do you think that the way that you process your emotions, um, where did that come from? Or is that just something that you attain? That's just how you are?
I found it interesting when I was researching about PTSD when I was writing the book, um, that there's a significant there is a significant I don't know how to say this, a significant percentage of people who have trauma will
Mm-hmm.
develop PTSD.
Mm,
But then a lot of people who have trauma don't develop PTSD. And I
mm,
was, what is it? Um, and I think there's probably a lot of reasons, but I have noticed things about myself. Like, I will I fell skiing one time and was tumbling down the mountain, and I remember the next day, and this was when I was in my 40s and went skiing with my boys,
Mhm.
and I remember that night, I just kept re-experiencing that falling down the mountain, that,
Mm.
and I have noticed in other points in my life that I will re-experience things and just keep re-experiencing 'em, and then you have to put it away, like,
Mhm.
it's uncomfortable to keep re-experiencing, and so I would shove that away, and I
Mm.
think that there's just a sensitivity that I have because 'cause I'm
Mhm.
pretty sensitive to things, um,
Mhm.
that it's like I'm definitely an introvert. When I read the book Quiet, I realized, "Oh, that explains a lot," because you're so like, from the time I was little, so overstimulated by things
Yeah.
that you need to keep it tamped down, and so when something very stimulating would happen, it would be like I would be trying really quickly to tamp it down. And I think that that
Mm.
probably had a lot to do with it, like put those emotions away because they're so uncomfortable. They're very
Mm.
overstimulating.
Yeah. What about shamefulness? I know I've worked with sexual assault victims and sexual harassment victims in the past in my military career, and having to take cases and things like that. The very and each individual it impacts them very differently. Some people, are able to just move on by themselves, and some people want resources like therapy and things like that. Some don't at all. They just want to deal with it on their own. But do you think that like did shame have any play in your own personal journey in not talking about it for so long? And then what got you to that point where you were able to finally say, you know what, I'm going to be very vocal about what happened to me?
So shame was huge. And
Hmm.
I think for a lot of reasons, I think everybody experiences some level of shame, and it may just be that you beat yourself up about
Hmm.
things that happened that you really you want to feel like you've got everything handled, and if something isn't going the way you want it to, we're very hard on ourselves. We kind of are, you know, that we beat ourselves up about that. So I got off track there. What was the question you just asked?
No worries. I was just generally asking about like, was shame like an impact for your particular
Huge.
experience, and then how did you go from not wanting to really address it to being very vocal to to the point where you're like, no, I'm going to talk about it. I mean, you wrote a book, which is
It
very like some people don't get there where they're like, I'm not like
it
talking
was
to anybody about
huge,
this. Mhm,
because I had so the incident that where somebody broke into my apartment, and it was a stranger rape, was
mhm,
what caused the PTSD. However, I
mhm,
had had a dating situation where I put myself in. Well, okay, this is how I thought about it. I put myself in a really stupid position and was assaulted. I never I never identified it as being assaulted. I just thought, "You stupid, you stupid
mm,
woman. It's your own fault. I'm never going to think about it. I am never going to talk about it." And so this was when I was early in college. And
mhm,
when it turned out that I needed to go to therapy, I was still so ashamed about that first situation, um, when I was in college, that I was afraid that a therapist would be able to wheedle it out of me, and I swore I was never going to talk about it. So that impacted, um, my getting well because my PTSD did not resolve, very quickly at all because I was keeping secrets. Um,
mhm.
And then the other part of it, and I put this in the introduction of the book, um, Brene Brown, who is a researcher, she's a sociologist researcher and has written a lot of books and writes
Mhm,
a lot about shame and vulnerability.
mm,
Said in her Netflix special, The Call to Courage, that
mhm,
the number one, the number one universal thing that most women are carry shame about is body image,
mm,
and that was huge for me. I did not want to create a visualization of me in those kind of vulnerable situations that were humiliating. And
yeah,
if I talked about it, I thought I would be creating visualizations for anybody that I was talking to. So I was not going to talk about that stuff. So it was very difficult. I would sit in silence a lot, and I was ashamed of other things that I thought about, which are all of the beating yourself up things. And
mhm,
I was saying that control was a big issue with me. And one of the first things that my therapist said when I started in therapy is, I am not going to direct the therapy. You need to stay in control of yourself
mhm,
and what you talk about. That's really important for you and your healing. So you get to direct the therapy. You talk about anything you want. Well,
mhm,
that's great, except for someone who's so ashamed of their thoughts. I would sit in silence in a lot of the therapy. um, I think insurance paid a whole lot more money than they needed to because I was too ashamed of what I was thinking about to say anything. And it didn't even
mm.
need to be about the assault. It could just be about life. I was just ashamed.
But I think it's a part of the process though, because I feel like what you said was a very good point, and I'm sure you know men and women that have been sexually assaulted have feel the same as far as like can't talk because I'm ashamed. There's shame there. Um,
Yeah,
it's
and I'll
uncomfortable.
say with the other thing that Brene Brown said was that for women, the number one shame issue is body image. For men, it's weakness. And
Mm,
so when you're talking about anything where a man is been overpowered, something's
yeah.
out of his control, that's a shame trigger because of the weakness issue.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Being
when I have talked
is it
to
called
men before with
demasculated?
like they can describe things that are like a lot of information to take in about things that happen to their body, but if there's an issue about weakness, that's really difficult.
Yeah, yeah, I've noticed that too. Yeah. Now, how? Let's go. I know I kind of got away from it, but kind of journeying there. The therapy, because like you know, you've gone through all that because it's a process when you've experienced a very traumatic event, be it sexual assault or anything that was indirectly traumatic to the individual. How did you find the right therapist for you? Like, what was that journey like, or even coming to terms with, you know what? I do need therapy, you know, and now I have to find, the person that I would like to help me through this journey.
Right, right. Well, yes, my professor said that that really the only way through the PTSD was through therapy. I mean,
Mhm,
you could wait until you were able to bury things again, but you're not going to be better. And if I was going into
mhm,
counseling, I couldn't carry my own issues into the
mm,
therapy session because then you put them, you see everything that somebody's talking about through the lens of your own issues. So I
yeah,
knew I had to find someone. Um, so I used the yellow pages at the time because this was before
mhm,
you could just easily look things up on the internet. Now it's a little easier, but I looked for, uh, I wanted to talk to a psychologist and I wanted it to be someone who specialized in sexual assault. Um,
mm,
so I contacted a number of therapists, and and talk to them on the phone. And my therapist, Ryan, that I finally, um, went to see, suggested I come in and we talk and I see how I feel. So that's how
Mm,
we did it. Yeah, and now
okay.
things like Psychology Today has a list of therapists, and there are some other sources for getting therapists and putting in what your issues are that you're looking for expertise in.
Okay. And I know, what point for you was this in therapy? You were, because this event happened in your early 20s. What point in life were you, or were you like married already, had children? Were you begin, or before, was this beforehand when you started therapy?
No, so I tried therapy once, um,
Mm,
right, and it was right after I'd met my husband when we were dating, and it was really rough because I was a mess.
mm,
And I went to see a therapist at the time. It was supposed to be a psychologist. It ended up being his clinical social worker wife, and I didn't choose her to begin with. She chose me,
mm,
which I already
mm,
took control away from me because I thought I was going to him. And then she was very directive. She asked me questions.
mm,
I just felt really judged, and it it didn't feel good at all. So
mm,
I finally, after a couple of sessions, I stopped and just put it all away. So then
mm,
I got married, had kids, and that's when I was the Red Cross director for a number of years and went back to college. After
mm.
my kids were in school. So that's
Oh,
that's when I was triggered. I was in my late 30s at the time. And then
okay.
and then I didn't write the book until another 20 years when I had retired.
Wow, and I don't and good so, like, so you were saying, like, as far as, like, therapy for the viewer that's listening, keywords that, Linda shared was, their specialty, right? Because 'Cause you're not just gonna go to a random therapist, like, that just does whatever. You wanna pick out, well, what are the things that they specialize in? Because everyone that's, in that field don't are not, like, specialists, in every single area, so that's, I think, a very good point to know for yourself, and then your comfort level with that person, because you know how we have our own
That's
intuition, or that
huge.
those, signals. Yeah, it's like, are you comfortable with that person? I had an experience with a therapist after my father died, and I was like and I didn't know if it was because I have a bachelor's in psychology, so I was trying not to, pick out
Right.
all the terms that she was using and like, "This doesn't sound right," but at the same time, it just did not feel right certain areas. So I was just like, "Ugh." But that process can be a whole, like, gosh, I really don't feel like having to do the work of, finding another therapist and making sure, but it is necessary, especially when you know you need therapy.
So the one of the biggest factors, there are a couple of really major factors in how effective therapy will be for you. And
Mhm,
one of them is what the happenstance of life outside of
mm,
therapy. Um,
mhm,
but the other is your relationship with your therapist. And then
mm,
the techniques that they use, the method of therapy that they use, um, has some effect, but not nearly as much as your relationship with your therapist. And I
mhm,
know I've talked to people who really like their therapist, and I had one friend who had a therapist, and she said, "We just go in and we talk and talk and talk, but it doesn't feel like we get anywhere." So
right,
you need to be, and the difficulty, um, when when depression is part of what's going on, is it feels so chaotic in your head, you don't even know how to talk about it. And
mm,
so going to talk to somebody and having it not feel like the right fit, it
mhm,
feels overwhelming to go
yeah,
and try and talk to somebody else. But what I have said, and what I have found to be true with people, is when you are talking to the right person for you, you're going to be talking about the right stuff immediately. And it
mhm,
doesn't matter if it's chaos in your head, you're going to be talking about the right things, and the way that they are responding is already helping you clarify things for yourself and for them. So if it doesn't feel like a good fit, then try
Mhm.
other people. And it may be a few times, but when you get to the right person, you're going to know it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. You are gonna definitely know the right person, for you, because it should feel like I'm moving not necessarily wanna move forward, like, really quickly, but that they're able to walk you through, your process.
So I said that the happenstance of life is a big part of the healing process too, while
Mhm.
you're in therapy. But the reason is because you're changing perspectives while you're in
Mm,
therapy. And that's what a
right.
good therapist will give you is they will give you different perspective on the stuff that you are thinking. And it's one of the biggest areas about shame is that you've got your own perspective just rolling around in your head and it's just over and over and over. You're you're really looking at things from the same perspective and you're not
Yeah.
going to get another perspective until you talk to somebody else. And then you can take that new perspective into the world and you're looking at things through a different lens. And that's how you
Mhm.
get from negativity to gratitude, is just
Yeah.
looking at things through a different lens.
Yeah. And definitely I would say be open, of course, when you're ready, with whatever stage and your process that you're into the viewer. Of course, you have to be open to it so that you can, make sure these sessions for therapy and therapy are going to be successful sessions for you in your place of healing. Because when you're not open, I can just imagine like the walls are up. Like, I'm not trying to hear what the therapist, I don't want to hear a perspective right now. So if you're there, like, what would you suggest to a person that's just like, because it's there are steps to this thing. There are steps to walking out trauma.
I think that a really effective way for therapists to work. Um, Therapists that talk a lot don't I don't find that as helpful
Yeah.
because the changes that really stick with you are the ones that you come up with yourself. So
Mhm.
when a therapist can ask you and you can start talking about what's been in your head and the way that you see things and you're stating your perspectives about things. It's almost like just little shifts, like a
Mhm.
therapist can repeat back the way that you're seeing things, and then maybe make a little shift that you go, "Oh, I never thought about that."
Mhm. Mm.
But it needs to come from the client or the patient.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
because when people start talking too much, you know how it is. You're missing half of what they're saying. Your mind is
Right.
wandering. It's not anything that is really sitting with you internally.
Mhm.
You're not really making a lot of changes. So, um,
Right.
as uncomfortable as it can be sometimes, a good therapist is one that's going to make it comfortable for you to talk even about uncomfortable things.
Yeah, yeah. I
There's
agree. So I'm like, if the therapist is talking the whole time, what am I here for? Like,
yeah, yeah. They might be
yeah.
nice and it could be a good friend relationship, but it may not be all that helpful. And
Yes,
there is
exactly.
um, a therapeutic stance called unconditional positive regard. And
Mm,
it almost feels, especially for people that are beating themselves up, like a warm hug. Like
mhm,
people are just going, "You are okay exactly as you are. I will accept whatever you say, and we may talk about it, but I'm not going to judge you." That's unconditional positive regard. Whatever you say, it's not going to be judged.
mm,
And it allows you the space to be able to not only talk a little bit, but start being a little kinder to yourself.
mhm. Oh, yeah, I can see that. Because I mean, that space to be human to with someone that now, okay, I can trust this person. I feel a trust here. I feel safe here. And just allow you, like you said, to be vulnerable when maybe you're not really quite comfortable yet, but they're still showing you like it's okay to be, vulnerable. Especially when you're bringing such a delicate, sensitive, topic to someone. You're like, I don't
Right.
know.
And people, your therapist is going to be much less judgmental to you than you are to yourself. So it's
Mm,
still about like, I don't want to talk about things that I don't want to think about because I'm still judging myself really harshly. So
yeah.
so those are things that a lot of people and a lot of people that I've talked to um, who've read my book, and the title
Hmm.
of the book is Braving Therapy because you need to be brave enough to stick with it. And a
Yeah.
lot of people have said, "Oh man, I've gone to therapy a bunch of times and I go and, I get the solution to my problem and then I quit and then never stick it out to find out what's
Mm,
underneath it all. What's
yeah.
underneath the problem that you're having that keeps bringing you back into therapy?"
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
the message is how important it is to stick it out and really start understanding yourself better.
Yeah, because that's a whole process within itself. And that's like so I have 2 parts, right? 2 questions, and I'm gonna chop it up. Let me pose this question first, 'cause and this is just a curious question. It wasn't even on my original question list. But I was just thinking because, you stated that you decided to or came into the, I guess, being comfortable with going to therapy and, like, well after the experience, the sexual assault occurred. Now you're in your 30s, right, when you started therapy. But I'm thinking you got married, you had kids, like, how did she do all this and still have this somewhere? Like, did you s I don't know, because 'cause I'm thinking I don't wanna relate it to myself, but I'm just thinking, like, how did you carry on in life with such a traumatic experience that had occurred still
Oh,
there?
I was just, that occurred in my background. Every once in a while, if it came up, like I was in a mother's group, one
Yeah,
time and somebody was talking about having been raped as in their past life. And I said, yeah, I was raped. And like, it just felt like that's as much as I would say about it. Like it wasn't something that I wanted to talk about, but I felt
mhm.
like, it happened. I got through it. I'm fine.
Mm, kinda stuff, okay.
I'm
Like, just
tough.
we're gonna leave it right
I'm
here.
tough. I can do everything.
Right, when really, those things are still there within us, we're just not, like you just weren't talking about it just yet, like, you hadn't found your
Okay.
point.
So there was also in this, you probably would not even know what I'm talking about, but there was an ad. I think it was a perfume ad called Anjali.
Mhm.
Um, when I was in my 20s and early 30s. And I say this because I stayed home with the kids when they were little and my husband at the time wanted me to be working. And I said, "What
Okay.
did you think when I had kids?" And he said, "Honestly, I thought I married the Anjali woman." And the song was, "I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget who's the man." I'm an Anjali woman, and it was like she was gorgeous and she was just doing it all. And
Uh-huh.
it's like that's kind of how I think we were being told we should handle life. Like we can just do it
Mhm.
all.
But we can't. We can't. We cannot do it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me then to this question, about at what point then as after therapy did you start to notice then your shift, in your perspective of your healing journey? Because you've had walked out these, stages where, you know, "Mm, I'm processing it by myself right now. I'm open to therapy, didn't find the right therapist. I'm taking some time off again." Because we go back and forth with, that's just how trauma works. I feel like that's just how
Right.
it is. There's no like one size fits all. This is going to be a perfect walkthrough, like, quick,
Right.
fix. It can be a very long journey, sometimes and often delayed, to where I might not even deal with it or the individual. It could be 30 years later, and all of a sudden it starts to, hit you in the face where it's like, okay, I gotta, I gotta do something about this. Like, so where did you though in your process of you're in therapy now? Did you feel like, okay, this is, I don't want to say working. I hate to use that term, but it just feels,
I wondered
yeah.
I wondered a lot when I was in therapy, am I almost done? Like, I felt like I was getting better and
Hmm.
things were kind of working themselves out, and I kept wondering, and I was afraid that I would go in one time, and the therapist would say, "Okay, we're good," and would let me go, and I didn't that worried me, but
Hmm.
I felt like I was resolving the PTSD, and when he would explain, like, I would not be quite clear on things, and he would explain that I still was not really feeling all of the feelings. Like, I never
Hmm.
cried, never cried,
Mm.
and
Mm.
and this went on for years, and it took several years for me to even finally realize that I needed to talk about that humiliating dating situation. So things dragged on for a long time, and there was a lot of work to do. And when I finally got to the point, I did get to the point after several years of therapy where I finally started crying,
Mm.
and that was like it was like it opened the floodgate of emotions, and it was when we were really able to start winding down the therapy. I was getting better. I was emotional about a lot of stuff, um, and things in my life were getting better. My husband and I had always had a rocky marriage, and
Mm.
we had decided that it would be best if we separated, and that
Mhm.
helped. But it was all tough. And what helped too is my therapist said, "You come when you need to. I'm not just
Mm.
cutting you free." So all of that was really helpful. And I went forward from then feeling more like a whole person, like I had all of my emotions. Um, I was ready to take on life as more authentically myself. But I will
Mhm.
say that I've met and married my second husband, who was just, I feel like he was my soulmate. He was a
Mhm.
wonderful guy, and I married him 5 years after my first husband and I split up, so I was through therapy, but I still kind of handled things in the I very humiliating stuff. There is
Mhm.
something that therapists will say, and I say
Mhm.
it to people a lot. If what I just asked you is making you uncomfortable, that's probably something we need to work on.
Right.
And
Yes.
with my second husband, he was a college dean. He did a lot of advising, and of of everything, I think entering a relationship with him, as really authentically myself, I don't think he'd ever have been interested in me if I was the controlled, less emotional person than when I
Mm.
met him. But also, when I would have those difficult and humiliating things that would happen, I was working in school and things would happen, and I'd start beating myself up, and I'd start getting depressed. And he would finally, when I was in a state where I was just being kind of flat,
Mhm.
numbing my emotions because I was uncomfortable with something that had embarrassed me. And he would finally
Mhm.
sit me down and make me talk about it. And he never judged me. It's still that kind of unconditional positive regard that made me truly change my perspective about things that make me feel embarrassed, that I stopped
Mhm.
beating myself up. My husband has since passed,
Mhm.
and I really thought I would be in trouble when he was gone, but that is a gift that he left me is I don't beat myself up anymore. I don't have
Mm.
negative self-talk self-thoughts, and that was a gift that I received from him and from my therapist, but just not letting myself go down that beating yourself up road.
Yeah, yeah. I love that for that he was able to impart that into you. I mean, I just always feel 'cause, like, we're all human, and I think that people that just judge just aren't tapped into their, like,
Yeah.
healthier version of themselves. Like, hello, we're human. We're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna, things happen. We're gonna be sad, be depressed sometimes, all this kinds of things. So like I'm glad he was able to impart that don't judge yourself, because you're human, Um so you're allowed to have these human experiences. And then sharing that like those some of the after therapy, during therapy moments, right? That you experience, that you will experience when you're in a healthy relationship with your therapist or any individual. But do you think that for the viewer that is on the cusp, they're getting there, they're in their healing transition, I'll say it like that, to where they're sourcing out, they're thinking about walking this thing out with a therapist or just even talking about it. If in the state of not talking about it though, do you think that staying disconnected or like, I'm just curious, or silent for so long, did that have what were the impacts like of that for you? Like as far as like negative impacts? Because I would hate for someone just to stay silent forever, taking it to the grave. Like, please don't do that. Like, there are people out there that want to help you for a reason or that can help you. But staying disconnected, what do you think is like some of the, or what were for you, I should say, some of the impacts or can be the impacts for somebody else when they do that, when they
Well,
choose to stay silent?
I it just makes your life harder.
Mm,
Um, it doesn't allow you to connect with the people that you want to connect with if you're hiding things. So I'm just
mhm,
reading in the book The Tools by Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels. Um, they're therapists, and they were talking about the shadow person, and that really it's those it's those parts of ourselves that we're most embarrassed by, that if we put it out there, that's what helps us connect with others, because everybody has those things that they're embarrassed about, that they beat themselves up about, and the way that you can feel better is to normalize that, to talk to other people, get a new perspective, find out that other people have the same kind of stuff going on. That
mhm,
rape situation from college that I didn't even identify as a rape for years,
mhm,
happened when I was like 19, and I had been beating myself up about it for my whole life until I went to therapy. And when I finally, and it prevented me from getting better. I mean, I was in therapy for 5 years. I wouldn't talk about it. And when I
mhm,
finally talked about it, my therapist said, "How old were you?" And I told him, I said I was 19. He said, "So you were a kid."
mm,
And that perspective shift was huge.
mm.
And he said, "How many kids do you know that haven't made some decisions that they're sorry for later?"
Mm,
It's like every kid, every person. And we, and you just hold yourself to a higher standard, and you never normalize experiences if you don't share them.
yeah.
So that was the big learning, and I still have a hard time with when I get in a funk, and I have realized that the first thing I need to do is text somebody, just to because it's too hard when your mind is in that chaotic swirl to talk to
Mhm,
somebody, but I can text them and just kind of start the conversation, and
mhm,
somebody always calls me up, and, you know, as soon as you have the conversation, you can be in a funk for weeks, and as soon as you have a conversation with somebody where you admit a little bit of it, you're gonna feel better.
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, I was just thinking, like, I'm pretty sure that we all, it's just as people can go back and, uh, if you had those hard points, those trauma points in life where you're like, "Wait a minute, I was only, like, 17. I was only,
Yeah, and
19, 20s," you know?
you carry stuff with you as though you're the fully formed person you are right now.
Right. Exactly, putting way too much pressure on ourselves like that. It's just like, "Wait a minute,
Yeah,
let me rethink this. Let me go back and, give myself some grace." Because
and that's just it, Nina, is nobody gets through life without having something that's really hard for them and really
Mhm,
chaotic for them. But I truly believe that that's the reason that we are on this great journey, because that's where we
mhm.
learn. Like, even when I was sitting in therapy in the hardest times, it was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable. But I also felt at the same time that it was so hard, but I was learning so much and I was growing so much. And
Yeah, yeah,
that is that is the benefit of all of the hard stuff if you don't try and hide it. I could have been
yeah,
going years earlier if I hadn't just buried it.
yeah. Exactly, and I mean, it's hard, like, we're gonna go through life, life is not, I don't know, whatever your favorite dessert is all the time. If I could eat my favorite dessert all the time without gaining weight and all the consequences that come with like that's just my daily meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I would do it. But that's not life. We're gonna, like you said, experience some hard things, and sometimes we just don't feel like dealing with it. I've been there myself, as far as trying to emotionalize like the things that I've experienced in life and not wanting to, you know, deal with it or even approach it at all and skip some years, of having to probably like I could have walked out my life a little bit more healthier had I addressed it. But how do you think? Like, what do you think about like? Is it possible for someone to heal like without feeling overwhelmed with it, the process of it all, and trying to like go through it like with like just everything at once, just kind of like it's coming at you. I need to heal from this thing. Life is still lifing. How would you suggest to someone to like, hey, just get started like here or whatever you want to share with that?
Um, there are more and more therapies for PTSD, um,
Mhm,
and there are things that can help people get through talking about it. Like there's EMDR, which is
mhm,
um, it's a technique that therapists can use to help you talk about the really difficult experiences without having it make you feel so anxious. So
mm,
it's EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
mhm,
So it's the same thing that happens when we dream and our eyes
mhm,
are moving when we're dreaming. And
mhm,
the therapist just does a technique where he's just moving his finger or whatever back and forth, um, causing you to kind of split your focus while you're talking about something that's very upsetting. Um,
mhm.
so So there's that technique. There's also a book called, which everybody's talking about now, The Body Keeps the Score by Dr.
Oh, yep.
Bessel van der Kolk. And
Yeah, I have that book. Mhm,
he spent his entire career working with people with PTSD in a lot of military um,
mhm,
and he's developed a lot of other techniques that are not about going back and revisiting all of those really difficult traumas that a lot of our military people experience, because it can
mhm.
be re traumatizing to talk about those things. So there are other
Yeah.
techniques um, to, to deal with. the problems of PTSD without having to actually talk about it. Um, Finding a therapist who does work with PTSD, cognitive behavioral therapy is the primary therapy um, that's used with PTSD, but there are others. But again, I said that um, the technique is not as important as your relationship with your therapist.
Mm,
So,
that's important. Yeah, that
yeah,
comfort, once you get to that place where I'm ready for therapy now. Now you have to find the therapist that's so true that you're comfortable with. And I would suggest it to be patient, with yourself. Like if you don't like that therapist, the first one that you had a session with, it's okay. There are other therapists out there and you will find, that one person. It's just like a relationship, right? Like you're dating somebody and you may have, gone on this date with this individual and that is not it, right? That's not going to be your husband, wife, partner, or whatever. That's just, it's a dating situation,
it
it didn't
takes a
work
bit of
out.
it takes a bit of time
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
work
Yeah.
up a level of comfort and trust so that
Mhm.
you can start talking, and it's not just about the other person, it's about yourself. I
Yeah.
realized that a lot of my trust issues were about my not trusting myself to make good
Mm.
decisions. Um, and all of those play into the therapy and what you're willing to talk about. But
Mm.
this is okay. So, this is the really cool thing that I think the reason why you and I both like this profession is that it's so interesting. It's so
Mhm.
interesting to kind of explore what it is that's making us tick and how it
Mhm.
is that we can grow and develop into the people that we really want to be.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
it's
I
fascinating.
It is very fascinating. I like the part, that was good you said that, those areas that you don't trust about yourself, what is that? And then when you said earlier about how therapists say, if that's an area that, is, uh,
Uncomfortable.
uncomfortable,
It's uncomfortable to
you
talk
might
about.
you
Yeah,
might wanna tap into that,
right.
and, it's those fearful places, but no need to be scared, right? Just go ahead and take those steps, and
Well,
you all will get so much. Yeah.
I would say that for people who are well, I've said this a number of times that if you even think that maybe it would be helpful to talk to a therapist, if it's ever crossed your mind, it would
Mhm.
be helpful to talk to a therapist. But one of the things that is a tip off too, if there are things that keep on happening that you're uncomfortable, I'm not comfortable talking about that. I'm not comfortable with that situation. I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable. That's all stuff you need to work on. Those
Yes.
are the areas. If you're not sure the kind of stuff that
Yes.
you would have to talk about in therapy, that's all the
Yes.
stuff.
Yes. Imagine the emotional damage that you're just causing to yourself too, like by just stuffing things, down. Um,
If you're not comfortable
yeah,
talking about it, that's probably stuff you're beating yourself up about.
that part. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is so true. That is so true. And there's so much to unpack and even get into like in your book, but where can tell the viewer please where they can find your book, where they can purchase it, where can they find you on social media if they want to connect with you, and so forth, please, if you don't mind, Linda.
Okay. I wrote the book under the name L. Feig Knipe.
Mhm.
So I have a website that's lfeigknipe.com. And you can go there. I don't do too much on the website, but you can just click on buy the book and it would take you
Mhm.
to Amazon. Or if you'd prefer to go to your own bookstore, they can order it. I don't think most bookstores carry it. I know they don't because I don't get a lot of notifications that it's been purchased by bookstores, but you can order it. It's in a few libraries. Again, you can ask for it and they can order it. Um, so Amazon and your bookstores and library. I have a Facebook and Instagram account that's L Feig Knipe. So
Mm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, the title of Linda's book is Braving Therapy, Rape, Buried Trauma, and the Triumphant Journey Over PTSD. And the title within itself, I think, even though like we're talking more about like not just your book, but your journey. But I thought the title was very impactful too, because to me, Braving Therapy is just like, you know, are you ready to talking to other people? Because, I've been there, and I've mentioned this before, on this specific channel in many episodes. So it's not nothing, anything new, but I was a late conversationalist because I felt like I didn't have the language, to talk about what I was going through, let alone that I want to share with someone I did not know. And then, the areas that you mentioned, maybe I just didn't trust myself. Those parts. So,
So I do think, it was very, um, I I've really felt, uh, excited isn't the word, but when I started reading reviews on Amazon of what people were saying, if you want to kind of find out what therapy really is about, if you read some reviews, because people have written, a lot of people who deal with depression and anxiety had a lot
mhm,
to say about learning, but a lot of them had been to therapy. And some people said, I thought therapy was about them asking how I feel about things. And really,
mm,
therapy is about perspective shifts.
mm, yeah,
So that can is just a bit of an education itself. There were a lot of aha moments and, "Oh, I'm really excited that this is helping this group of people." So,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because like you said, perspective shifts, like you want that, because I don't believe that you're necessarily, because obviously, like, why do we go to therapy? I'm not thinking in the most healthiest state right now, so I need someone else's perspective to show me something different that I may not be, you know,
yeah.
able to get there right now because I don't see it, yet. So yeah. I think that's very true. Perspective shift
Yeah,
in a healthy way.
yeah.
But thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, for being open to just come on and share on the From Grief to Purpose channel. I really appreciate you. And I always ask, if you don't mind, like if there's anything that you want to share to the viewer that is watching right now, that in this month, yes, we're in April. This is the month of sexual assault awareness. Is there anything that you want to just leave with them? You can whatever whatever you want it to be. It can be encouragement, what have you, resources, tools that they should go pick up outside of your book. But if you could just leave something with the viewer.
Well, I'll say really quickly, there are a lot of apps that I have put on my phone that help with PTSD symptoms. You just look up
Mm,
PTSD under apps, and you can find that. The best ones I think are put out by the Veterans Administration, their VA apps. But what I want to
mm,
say mostly is we all have stuff. We all have hard things, but I think, as I've said before, that is the real value of living is learning how to navigate the hard things in life and to grow. And I see you no matter what your hard thing is, and give yourself grace.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
if
Wow.
you
Yeah.
think that talking and getting a different perspective would be helpful, then do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I love that. Because we don't teach enough on that, like how to get through the hard things in life. I'm talking about like at a earlier age. And then, so that way we know a lot of times we're in this
I think
wrapped up.
I will say one other thing, that
Mhm.
you don't gain confidence in anything without being uncomfortable. You don't gain
Mm,
confidence by doing easy stuff. So if you want to up your confidence, you've got to do hard things. Got
this
to be
is so
uncomfortable.
true.
Yep.
Got to be uncomfortable, and I would attest and agree to that. Listen, to the viewer, if something in this episode resonated with you, just know, I know this was a very sensitive topic, certain points, but just know that you're not alone, and you don't have to carry everything by yourself. Like, like Miss Linda shared, we have to sometimes go through those uncomfortable moments because that's how we get through life. But know that we're doing it together. So you're in community, whether it's you joining this community by subscribing or find somewhere to join a community, a therapist, apps, download an app that could be your initial start to deal with PTSD if you're dealing with that, especially dealing with trauma experiences, but start somewhere. So, but again, if you haven't already, and you would like to be a part of this particular community, go ahead and click the subscribe button and, share this with someone who you may know needs to hear this conversation that we had today with Linda. And that's our time. And thank you again, Miss Linda. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Have a good day.
Thank you.